The moment I saw that text from my sister to my husband, I stopped being a wife and became something far more dangerous. Bali will be perfect, she wrote. Just you and me, no her. So I booked a flight too. Now he's sobbing on my doorstep with nothing left, no money, no reputation, no future. And my sister? She should have remembered one thing about me. I always finish what I start. I never considered myself a vengeful person until the day I discovered my husband was sleeping with my sister. Betrayal has a way of sharpening the mind, stripping away hesitation, and revealing the cold, calculating beast that lives inside even the most composed women. And I was always composed. Always in control. That's why Daniel never saw me coming. It started with a text message. Not on his phone. No, Daniel was too careful for that. He kept his phone locked, his screen tilted away, his notifications hidden. But he'd forgotten one critical detail. His iPad was synced to his iCloud. And I had access to it. That Sunday morning, the sun streamed through the windows, casting a warm glow over our pristine penthouse. Daniel was in the shower, humming some mindless tune, utterly unaware that his life was about to unravel. I picked up his iPad, intending to check the weather, mundane, harmless, when the notification appeared at the top of the screen. Sophie, sis, I can't stop thinking about last night. When can we do it again? For a moment time stopped. Sophie, my sister. And last night? Daniel had told me he was working late. Networking drinks, he'd said. A necessary evil for his big promotion. I'd kissed him goodbye, smoothed his tie, and told him not to stay out too late. I stared at the message, my fingers hovering over the screen. Then, like fate itself was mocking me, another message appeared. Sophie, sis, Bali is going to be perfect. Just you and me, no her. Bali. Not New York. Not a work retreat. Hawaii. A vacation. With her. My pulse was steady. My breathing even. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I smiled. Because in that moment I knew exactly what I was going to do. By the time Daniel stepped out of the shower, towels slung low on his hips, water dripping down his chest, the same chest my sister had no doubt touched, I had already locked his iPad, placed it back on the nightstand, and poured myself a glass of wine. Morning, gorgeous, he said, leaning down to kiss me. I turned my face slightly, letting his lips graze my cheek instead. You're in a good mood, I remarked, sipping my wine. Just thinking about that promotion, he said, grinning. The New York trip is going to seal the deal. New York trip. The words slithered between us, thick with deceit. Of course, I murmured. He had no idea I knew. No idea that the game had already begun. That afternoon, while Daniel was at the gym, or so he claimed, I got to work. I combed through his emails, his messages, his browsing history. I found the hotel confirmations, 2 bookings in Bali. One for him under his name. One for Sophie under an alias. I traced their conversations. The way he called her baby. The way she joked about finally being rid of me. The way they planned their future together, his money, her youth, my ruin. I took screenshots. I backed them up. I sent copies to a secure email only I could access. Then I dug deeper. Daniel had always been careless with money. He thought I didn't know about the offshore accounts, the shell companies, the shady investments. But I did. I knew everything. And now I would use it all against him. 3 days later, I transferred half of our joint savings into a new account, one he couldn't touch. I canceled his credit cards, citing fraud. I even called his office, pretending to be his assistant, and had his flight details changed, just a slight delay, nothing suspicious. When he came home that night, he was agitated. My card got declined at lunch, he snapped. I blinked at him, all innocence. That's odd. Did you call the bank? His mouth opened, then closed. But I watched as panic set in. The first crack in his perfect facade. And it was only the beginning. That night, as Daniel slept, I booked a flight to Bali. The same dates as his work retreat. The same hotel. I would be there. Watching. Waiting. And when the time was right, I would strike. The first-class cabin of the flight to Bali was eerily quiet. The hum of the engines a steady reminder that every mile carried me closer to the moment I had been waiting for. I sipped my champagne, the bubbles crisp against my tongue, and watched the clouds drift past the window like wisps of smoke. The irony wasn't lost on me. Daniel thought he was so clever, sneaking off to paradise with my sister while I sat at home oblivious. But I wasn't at home. I was here. And soon he would realize just how badly he had underestimated me. I had planned everything meticulously. My flight landed 6 hours before his, giving me enough time to settle in, to observe, to prepare. The resort they had chosen was one of those exclusive, secluded places, private villas with infinity pools, discreet staff, the kind of luxury that made infidelity feel like a vacation rather than a betrayal. I had booked the villa next to theirs, close enough to hear laughter through the thin walls, far enough that they wouldn't notice me watching. The moment I stepped into my villa, I set to work. Hidden cameras were small enough these days to fit in the grooves of door frames, in the leaves of potted plants. Audio recorders tucked into drawers behind paintings. I had spent weeks researching, ordering, practicing. By the time I was done, I would have every whispered confession, every touch, every lie documented. And then, just as the sun began to dip below the horizon, I heard them. Daniel's voice, loud and carefree, carried through the open window. "This place is insane," he said, and I could hear the grin in his words. Sophie's laugh followed, light, airy, the same laugh she'd used since we were children, the one that had always made people adore her. "Told you it would be worth it." I didn't move. Didn't breathe. I just stood there, listening as they walked into their villa, as the door shut behind them. The first wave of nausea hit me then, sharp and unexpected. I had known, of course. I had seen the messages. But hearing them, hearing the ease in their voices, the familiarity, made it real in a way that words on a screen never could. I clenched my fists, nails biting into my palms. No, I wouldn't break. Not now. I had a plan. That evening I dressed carefully. A flowing emerald green sundress that clung to my curves, my hair loose and cascading over my shoulders, sunglasses perched on top of my head. I looked like any other wealthy tourist, not a woman plotting revenge. I made my way to the resort's beachfront restaurant, the one I knew they had reservations at, and took a seat at the bar, my back to the entrance. I didn't have to wait long. "Can't believe we're finally here," Sophie sighed as they walked in. "No work, no stress, no her," Daniel replied, and the way he said it, like my absence was a relief, sent a fresh spike of fury through me. I waited until they were seated, until their first round of drinks arrived, before I made my move. I stood, letting my sunglasses slip down my nose just enough as I turned. And then I looked at them. The color drained from Daniel's face. Sophie's glass slipped from her fingers, shattering against the table. "Oh my God," she whispered. I let my lips curve into a slow, icy smile. "Fancy running into you two here." The next few moments were a blur. Daniel stammering, Sophie panicking. I didn't move. I just watched, savoring every second of their shock. What are you doing here?" Daniel finally managed. I tilted my head. "I could ask you the same thing. New York, wasn't it?" "What you doing here with my sister, Daniel?" "Ah. New York is Bali, is it?" His mouth opened, then closed. Like a fish. No lie came fast enough. Sophie, ever the actress, recovered first. It was a last-minute change. Daniel's meeting got moved, and I thought I'd surprise him. "How sweet," I said, my voice dripping with false warmth. "Just like old times, right? The three of us." The silence that followed was delicious. I didn't wait for an answer. I just turned and started to walk until Daniel lunged from his seat, knocking over his wine glass. Red liquid splashed across the white tablecloth like blood. The waitstaff rushing to clean up the spilled drink. "Wait, please." His voice cracked as he grabbed my wrist. Every head in the restaurant turned. A waiter froze mid-pour. Sophie made a choked noise. I let him drag me back a step, just enough to watch him unravel. "This isn't what it looks like," he begged, fingers trembling against my skin. It's nothing, it means nothing." I tilted my head. "You booked a villa in Bali for nothing?" A hushed gasp from a nearby diner. His grip tightened. "I love you," he hissed, desperate now. "You're my wife." I wrenched free with a smile. Not for long. The snap of my heels on marble echoed as I walked out, leaving him standing in the wreckage of his lies, exposed, humiliated, seen by every shocked face in the room. Back in my villa, I poured myself a drink and pulled up the live feed from the cameras. They were arguing. How the hell did she find out? Daniel hissed. "I don't know." Sophie's voice was shrill. "Did you tell her?" "Of course not." "Then what do we do?" I smiled, sipping my wine. This was only the beginning. And by the time I was done, they would wish they had never betrayed me. The argument unfolding on my laptop screen was even more satisfying than I had imagined. Daniel paced their villa like a caged animal, running his hands through his hair in that frantic way he did when he was cornered, while Sophie sat on the edge of the bed, her face pale, fingers twisting the hem of her dress. The audio feed picked up every hissed accusation, every panicked whisper. She knows Daniel. She fucking knows. She doesn't know anything. She's just bluffing. Then why is she here? I took a slow sip of my wine, savoring the way their voices trembled. Fear had a distinct sound, sharp, breathless, laced with desperation. And right now they were drowning in it. I had anticipated their reactions. Daniel would default to damage control, spinning lies even when the truth was staring him in the face. Sophie would crumble faster, her guilt eating at her like acid. But what I hadn't expected was how easy it was to dismantle them. One carefully placed encounter, one icy smile, and their perfect little fantasy had already begun to rot from the inside out. I closed the laptop. Let them stew. The real game was just beginning. That night I sent Daniel a single text from an unknown number, a screenshot of Sophie's messages to an old college friend, complaining about him. He's so needy. Sometimes I wonder if this is even worth it. It was a lie, of course. A fabrication. But in the span of one evening their alliance would shatter. By morning the cameras caught them screaming at each other, Sophie in tears, Daniel calling her a treacherous bitch. I packed my bags, my work here done. Let them destroy each other. I had bigger plans waiting at home. The flight home was smooth, the kind of effortless journey that makes you forget you're suspended 30,000 feet above the earth. I sipped champagne, stretched my legs in the first-class cabin, and watched the clouds drift past like wisps of smoke. The stewardess smiled at me, mistaking my quiet satisfaction for relaxation. She had no idea the storm I had left behind in Bali or the one waiting for me at home. Daniel hadn't called. Not once. That was telling. If he had been smart, he would have tried to spin some desperate lie to claw back control. But he was too busy fighting with Sophie, too tangled in his own mess to realize that my silence was far more dangerous than my anger. The car service was waiting when I landed. The driver took my bags without a word and I settled into the back seat, pulling out my phone. The surveillance feeds from our home were still active. Empty rooms, undisturbed furniture, the quiet hum of the air conditioning. Daniel hadn't returned yet. Good. That gave me time. Our penthouse was exactly as I had left it, cold, pristine, a monument to the life we had built together. A life he had shattered. I walked through the rooms slowly, running my fingers over the backs of chairs, the edges of tables, the framed photos of us smiling like fools. I stopped in front of one taken on our 5th anniversary. Daniel's arm was around my waist, his lips pressed to my temple. I had thought he loved me then. I took the photo off the wall and dropped it into the trash. Then I got to work. The home office was where Daniel kept his most important documents, or at least the ones he thought were hidden. The locked drawer in his desk was child's play. I'd known the combination for years. Inside were files on his offshore accounts, the shell company he thought I knew nothing about, the paperwork for the apartment he'd bought under a false name, the one I was sure he intended to move Sophie into. I photographed every page, every number, every secret. Then I made a call. Marcus? It's me. I need you to freeze the accounts. Marcus was the best forensic accountant in the city, and more importantly, he owed me a favor. By the time Daniel realized what was happening, his money would be gone. Next was the company. Daniel had spent years climbing the corporate ladder, schmoozing investors, playing the golden boy. But I knew where the bodies were buried. The embezzlement. The insider trading. The lies he'd told to secure his last promotion. I sent an anonymous tip to the board. Then I waited. It took less than 24 hours. I was in the kitchen pouring myself a glass of wine, when my phone buzzed with a notification. A news alert. Prominent finance executive under investigation for fraud. I smiled. Daniel returned home 3 days later. He looked like hell, dark circles under his eyes, his suit rumpled, his usually perfect hair a mess. He froze when he saw me sitting on the couch, legs crossed, sipping my wine. You, he said. Me, I agreed. He took a step forward, his hands clenching into fists. What the fuck did you do? I tilted my head. I could ask you the same thing. He lunged then, his control snapping. But I was ready. The second he was within reach, I threw the wine in his face. He staggered back, spluttering. You're done, I said softly. The money's gone. The company knows what you did. And Sophie? I smiled. She's already left you, hasn't she? The look on his face told me everything I needed to know. The divorce papers arrived the next morning. Daniel stood in the doorway staring at them, his hands shaking. You can't do this. I already have. He looked up at me, his eyes red. I'll fight you. I leaned in close enough to smell the desperation on him. Try. Then I closed the door in his face. The divorce papers sat between us like a live grenade, the silence stretching taut between each tick of the hallway clock. Daniel's hands trembled as he flipped through the pages, his face draining of color with every clause he read. I watched from the doorway, arms crossed, savoring the way his breath hitched when he reached the financial disclosures, the ones that laid bare just how thoroughly I'd dismantled his empire. His lips moved soundlessly as he scanned the numbers, the reality sinking in. The offshore accounts were frozen, the shell company assets seized, even the penthouse we stood in now listed solely under my name. His head snapped up, eyes wild with a mix of panic and fury. This isn't legal, he spat, crumpling a page in his fist. You can't just. Already done, I said, plucking the papers from his grip. Marcus made sure of it. The name landed like a hammer blow. Marcus Whitaker wasn't just any forensic accountant, he was the man who'd saved Daniel's skin during the embezzlement scandal 2 years prior. The scandal I'd orchestrated to test Daniel's loyalty back then. His face went slack with realization. Oh, you didn't know? I smoothed the crumpled page against my thigh. Marcus has always worked for me. Every favor he did for you, every document he lost, all part of the insurance policy. Daniel made a strangled noise in his throat. For the first time in our marriage, I saw true fear in his eyes. Not just anger, not just desperation, terror. The kind that comes when a man realizes he's been outmaneuvered in a game he didn't even know he was playing. He staggered back a step, bracing himself against the foyer table. You planned this from the beginning. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. The doorbell rang. 3 men in tailored suits stood on the threshold, their briefcases gleaming under the hallway lights. Daniel recoiled as if struck. What the hell is this? Your new legal team, I said, stepping aside to let them in. Courtesy of your former employers. Though I suppose co-conspirators might be more accurate now that the SEC has their emails. The tallest attorney, a silver-haired shark named Reynolds, handed Daniel a thick envelope without a word. Inside were copies of the indictments. Wire fraud, insider trading, falsifying financial records. Enough to put him away for a decade. Daniel's knees buckled. He caught himself on the back of the sofa, papers scattering across the floor like fallen leaves. You set me up, he whispered. Reynolds adjusted his cufflinks. Actually, Mr. Carter, you did that yourself. My client simply ensured there was documentation. His gaze flicked to me, the ghost of a smile playing at his lips. I'd chosen him carefully, a man who'd represented 3 Fortune 500 CEOs in divorce cases, all of whom ended up bankrupt. Daniel lunged for me then, his veneer of civility shattering. You bitch. I'll. Reynolds' associate intercepted him with practiced ease, twisting Daniel's arm behind his back in one fluid motion. I wouldn't, the younger lawyer murmured, nodding toward the security camera in the corner, the one live streaming to my attorney's office. Daniel froze, chest heaving. I took my time walking to the wet bar, pouring 2 fingers of his favorite scotch, the 25-year-old Macallan he'd bought to celebrate screwing my sister. Here's what's going to happen, I said, handing him the glass. You'll sign the papers tonight. You'll walk away from the penthouse, the cars, the Cayman accounts. In return, I won't release the Bali footage to the press. I tapped my phone, pulling up a video thumbnail, Sophie straddling him on the villa couch, his hands tangled in her hair. Imagine what your mother will think. Or your golf buddies at the club. The glass slipped from his fingers, shattering on the marble. Sophie called at 3:17 a.m. I let it ring 4 times before answering, my voice deliberately groggy. Hello? You ruined my life, she shrieked. In the background, I could hear the clink of bottles, probably holed up in some cheap hotel, drinking her shame away. Daniel told me everything. The accounts, the indictments. I sat up slowly, switching on the lamp. The glow caught the edge of the framed photo on my nightstand. The two of us as children building sandcastles at the beach. Did he tell you about the tape? I asked softly. Silence. Then a choked sob. See, here's the thing, sophomore. I traced the edge of the photo frame. I could have destroyed you both the second I found out. But where's the fun in that? A car honked outside her window downtown then. Probably the Roosevelt. No, I wanted you to feel it. Every lie, every betrayal. The way I did. She was crying in earnest now, the kind of messy, ugly sobs that used to make our father roll his eyes. Please. I'm sorry, I was stupid. About that. I reached for the tablet on my nightstand, pulling up a file. Remember your little art gallery venture? The one Dad funded. A few taps and the transfer was complete. Check your email. A gasp. Then a thud, the phone dropping maybe. The gallery loans had been in her name alone, the repayment terms brutal. And now, thanks to a few forged signatures and a very cooperative bank manager, she owed $1.2 million. Due in full. I hung up while she was still screaming. Dawn was breaking when Daniel signed the papers. He did it in Reynolds' office, under the watchful eyes of 2 notaries, his signature a shaky scrawl across page after page. I watched from the window as he stumbled out onto the street, tie loose, his once expensive shoes scuffed from walking. He didn't look back. Reynolds handed me a sealed envelope. As requested. The Cayman funds are already transferred. Inside was a single key to a safety deposit box in Zurich. My contingency plan. Enough to disappear forever if I wanted. But I wasn't done yet. Because at 9 a.m. sharp the doorbell rang again. And this time it was Sophie. The doorbell chimed again, sharp and insistent, as if Sophie thought repetition might make me answer faster. I let it ring 3 more times before finally turning the knob, revealing my sister in all her disheveled glory, mascara smudged under bloodshot eyes, her usually sleek blonde hair tangled into a messy bun. She reeked of stale vodka and desperation. For a heartbeat, we just stared at each other, the weight of every childhood secret, every shared birthday party, every whispered sisterly confession hanging between us like a guillotine blade. You look terrible, I said, stepping aside to let her in. Sophie stumbled past me, her designer heels clicking unevenly against the marble floor. You ruined me, she spat, whirling around so fast she nearly lost her balance. The gallery loans, those signatures were forged. I closed the door with a soft click, locking it. Prove it. Her breath hitched. That was the beauty of my plan, she couldn't. The paperwork was flawless, the digital trail airtight. Our father's lawyers had already reviewed it, their verdict final. She owed the money. Every last cent. Sophie's hands clenched into fists. What do you want? I walked past her toward the wet bar, pouring 2 glasses of bourbon, the cheap kind she used to drink in college. Sit down. She didn't move. Suit yourself. I took a sip, savoring the burn. Here's the deal. You have 2 options. 1. You spend the next decade drowning in debt, selling your precious handbags just to afford rent on some shitty studio apartment. I set my glass down with a deliberate clink. Or 2. You help me finish what I started with Daniel. Her eyes narrowed. What? I slid a manila folder across the counter. Inside were bank statements, surveillance photos, and a burner phone. He's hiding money, Sophie. Not much, just enough to flee the country once the indictments drop. I tapped the top photo, Daniel entering a rundown motel on the outskirts of the city. He's meeting someone tonight. A guy who specializes in fake passports. Sophie's fingers trembled as she picked up the photo. How do you know all this? Because I know Daniel better than he knows himself. I leaned in close enough to smell the fear on her. And so do you. The motel was exactly as sleazy as the photos suggested: flickering neon sign, cracked pavement, the distant wail of police sirens cutting through the humid night air. Sophie sat in the passenger seat of my rented sedan, chewing her thumbnail raw. "This is insane," she muttered for the 10th time. I adjusted the wire hidden beneath her blouse. "Just stick to the script." She shot me a glare. "And if he figures it out?" I smiled. "He won't." Daniel was already waiting in room 114, the curtains drawn tight. Sophie knocked twice, then entered without waiting for a reply. I watched through the high-powered lens of my camera from the parking lot, the audio feed from her wire crisp in my earpiece. "Soph? What the hell? We need to talk." Her voice wavered just enough to sound genuine. "Alone." Pause. Then the rustle of fabric, Daniel pulling her inside. The camera feed showed a hulking figure in the corner, the passport guy, no doubt. "Perfect. You shouldn't be here," Daniel hissed. "I know about the money," Sophie blurted. "The account in Belize. The one you didn't tell me about." Silence. Then a sharp laugh. "Oh, this is rich. Did she put you up to this?" Sophie played her part beautifully, the betrayed lover, the desperate accomplice. "I just want what's mine, Daniel. After everything I sacrificed for you." "Get out." His voice turned deadly calm. "Before I throw you out." That was my cue. I sent the text with a single tap. Now. The police cars arrived in a symphony of screaming sirens and flashing lights. Daniel barely had time to lunge for the back window before the door exploded inward, officers pouring into the room with guns drawn. The passport broker went down first, tackled to the stained carpet. Daniel froze, hands half raised, his face a mask of sheer disbelief. And then he saw me. I stood in the doorway, arms crossed, as an officer read him his rights. His eyes locked onto mine, wide with dawning horror. "You?" I smiled. Sophie slipped past the chaos to stand beside me, the wire now visible where she'd unbuttoned her collar. "You were right," she murmured. "He really is predictable." Daniel's scream of rage echoed through the motel long after they dragged him away. Epilogue. 1 month later. The courtroom was silent as the judge read the verdict. Daniel's sentencing to 8 years in federal prison had been expected, but the way his face contorted in raw, unfiltered panic when the bailiffs clamped handcuffs around his wrists was still satisfying. I sat in the back row, sunglasses obscuring my eyes, a faint smile playing on my lips as I watched him twist in his seat to search the room for me. He found me easily. I wanted him to. His mouth moved, forming words I didn't need to hear to understand. "You did this." I tilted my head in acknowledgement. Then I turned my attention to the other defendant being led in, Sophie. She looked hollowed out, her once pristine designer blazer wrinkled, her hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. She had thought her immunity deal would protect her. She had thought she could walk away unscathed after testifying against Daniel. But she had forgotten one crucial detail. I had never stopped digging. The prosecutor stood, adjusting his glasses as he addressed the judge. "Your Honor, we have new evidence pertaining to Ms. Sophie Lawrence's involvement in the embezzlement scheme, evidence that directly contradicts her sworn testimony." Sophie's head snapped up. "What?" The screen behind the judge flickered to life, displaying a series of bank transfers. Sophie's secret offshore account, the one she had siphoned money into for years, long before Daniel ever entered the picture. The one she had used to steal from our father's company. I had known about it for months. I had been waiting for the perfect moment to reveal it. Sophie's lawyer shot to his feet. "Objection. This evidence was never disclosed." "It was uncovered just last night," the prosecutor said smoothly, nodding toward the detective who had delivered the files, the same detective I had anonymously tipped off. "Ms. Laurent falsified records, manipulated transactions, and deliberately concealed her theft under the guise of consulting fees. The total exceeds $2 million. Sophie's face went bone white. She turned in her seat, her wild gaze locking onto mine. I didn't blink. The judge didn't hesitate. "Bail is revoked. Ms. Laurent, you will be remanded into custody pending trial." The gasp from the gallery was almost comical. Sophie's knees buckled as the bailiffs moved in, her manicured hands clutching at the table. No, you don't understand. My sister, she pointed at me, her voice breaking. She set me up. The judge frowned. Do you have proof of that? Sophie opened her mouth then shut it. Because of course she didn't. I had made sure of it. As they dragged her out, she screamed my name, her voice raw with fury. I simply stood, smoothed my skirt, and walked out of the courtroom without a backward glance. The penthouse was empty when I returned, the silence a welcome relief. I poured myself a glass of wine and stepped onto the balcony, the city lights sprawling below me like a sea of stars. Daniel was in prison. Sophie would be soon. And I was free. The next morning I boarded a flight to Zurich. The safety deposit box there held everything I needed: a new identity, a new passport, and more than enough money to disappear forever. As the plane lifted into the clouds, I closed my eyes and exhaled for the first time in years. No loose ends. No regrets. Just peace. The end.